G'day and welcome to Oly35mm, user-based, quasi-empirical, cheap and cheerful videos on Olympus Zuiko branded 35mm lenses. And today I'm talking about a series, an OM series of lenses of what I call the portrait telephotos. Now that's my term, not Olympus's. Olympus talk about these as telephotos only in the range. Some people call them short telephotos, whatever you like, it doesn't really matter. I call them portrait telephotos because that's the role that I think that they best play. Now in this range, and that is between 85mm and 135mm, and there's a jump in the Olympus range from 135mm then to 180, there's no 150 or anything in between, is the 85mm f2, the 100mm f2, which I don't have a copy of, the 100mm f2.8, the 135mm f3.5, the 135mm f2.8, and I've thrown a couple of macros in, and I know that sounds a bit strange, but bear with me and I'll tell you for why. And at the moment I can show you the 90mm f2 macro, and hiding off camera is the 135mm f4.5 macro. I'll get to those in a little moment. In fact, I'll get rid of the 135s at the moment as well, and we will talk about these two little wonders, both 2 inches, both about a half a pound, so in metric that is 48mm, and this fella here is 260 grams. This fella here, the 100mm f2.8, is a bit lighter at 235 grams. You'll notice that the part of the reason for that is the f2, sorry, the 85mm f2 has a bit more glass there, and it being a bit brighter, it has a little bit more weight to it. Now both of them have 49mm filters on there, so as you can see, and they are the same length, roughly the same weight, but they are quite different lenses. Now let me put the 100mm aside just for a moment and talk a bit about this. I've got a bit of a story here. Now this is considered one of the nicest portrait lenses in the Olympus range, and I think it probably is pretty much, well, it's to do with the fact that it is probably one of the nicest portrait lenses in the range, but also it's become quite popular due to a British photographer, a lady by the name of Jane Bown. And that's B-O-W-N. I strongly suggest that if you're at all interested, that you look up her name and you look at some of the absolutely incredible images that were taken with this lens and the OM1. Fantastic photographer, but also fantastic lens and camera as well, for that matter. Now, I've wanted one of these since I was about 16, and I've only bought one a couple of weeks ago. I've run a few photographs through it, handful, maybe 20, 30 or so photographs through it so far. However, I'm starting to like it already. It really is a very, very nice lens. Now, this one will set you back. I actually bought this a little bit cheaper because it has, unfortunately, a mark on the front element, but in very good condition to excellent condition, you're looking probably at about $500, and it's worthwhile to get one of the later multi-coated models too as well. Now this one actually says it's multi-coated, but it is a slightly older model, so see if you can get one of the bigger numbered models if you can. Very nice, $500 roughly Australian. Now for about half of that, for about the same sort of condition, you'll get the 100mm f2.8. This should not be discounted. This is a very nice portrait lens in its own right. It flattens things out a little bit more. You're talking about the 85mm is a 28-degree angle of view. This is only a 24-degree angle of view, so it is a little bit less, and it does flatten perspective wise. It does tend to flatten out features a little bit, so if you're using it for a portrait, just think about that. The 85mm is a little bit more complimentary, I think. But both have beautiful bokeh, and I think this is worthwhile in its own right. In fact, I like this lens so much that I actually go looking for subjects. And they may not necessarily be people either, by the way, but I go looking for subjects to photograph with it. It's really, really nice. I do like this, and I do like factors for whatever reason, I don't know why, factors of 50mm. So 50, 100, 200, 300, that sort of thing. So about half the price, and well worth having a look at. This is a very nice little lens. Okay, the two 135mm. Now these are funny. I've discounted the 135mm for many years, and I really only bothered buying one because I wanted to use it on the micro four thirds sensor, actually, and so it became a 200mm lens effectively. However, since the Oly35mm project, I picked up an f2.8 as well. This was the first one I bought, and I put them on the film cameras, and I quickly warmed to them. It's a very nice focal length. It's a little bit longer. Again, it's an 18-degree field of view, or angle of view, compared to the 24 of the 100, and it's just, I don't know, it's just something that has grown on me, and I can't really put my finger on it necessarily, but these are two very worthwhile lenses to contemplate if you're thinking about that short telephoto end. It's about the end of what you want for a portrait lens. You probably don't want any bigger than this, but it's actually reasonably versatile if you keep your mind open, I think. Another thing about these two I find quite interesting, and this is only my own observations, is that the f2.8 is definitely my choice for the film cameras. Partly because it's a little bit brighter, which certainly helps when you're actually focusing or trying to focus, especially with my eyes these days. But the f3.5 seems to work better on the digital sensors. I'm not too sure why, but you can actually notice a difference between the two, and I think the 3.5 is actually better. 2.8 for film, 3.5 for digital, and like I said, in the micro four thirds with the 2x crop factor, a 270mm f3.5 is actually really nice. Although the equivalence is a little bit different in the apertures, and I'm not going to go there on the crop sensors. But two very, very nice lenses. Look, pick either, it doesn't really matter. The 135mm f3.5 shouldn't set you back any more than about $60 to $80. You can pick them up for $50, and that's about what I picked mine up for. And the 2.8 is, it can be anything up to about 3 times that price. So between about $150 and $200 for that. So the 3.5 is definitely well worth it, and I've also done a review on the 3.5 as well, so just check out the YouTube channel and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Okay, so the one that I have in my hand now is a quite amazing lens, and this is another one like the 85mm that I have wanted for quite some time. It's a lot newer. I think it came out in the 90s, but I can't quite remember now, but it certainly wasn't out in the 70s. It was one of the later issues of lenses, and this is a very versatile lens because it's a 1:2 macro or a half life size macro on a full frame sensor or on 35mm film, and it focuses also to infinity, so you can actually use it as a portrait lens too, and you've got that lovely big front element there, 55mm filter. It makes a very nice portrait lens as well. Beautiful macro lens, by the way. If you're thinking about a macro lens for this, it's well worthwhile thinking about this one as well. However, it is quite expensive. In this sort of condition, they're probably worth around about $900, but you may pay anything up to $1,000, $1,100 for a mint one if you actually wanted one. So you'll need to have deep pockets for that. The other problem with this too is I think it really only works on film and full frame. It seems to go better on the bigger bodies, and that's mainly because it's about 550 grams, so around about a pound in weight. And in fact, the 100mm f2 is around about the same. So the 100mm f2 will sit around about $1,100. So this is actually possibly better value given the fact that it is more flexible in what you can do with it. But it is a very popular lens, not that easy to come by, but people like it a lot and it gets great reviews, and I can certainly back that up. A lot of time for the 90mm f2. It's a bit of a favourite. Now, this fella's a bit of a funny one. This is the 135mm f4.5, and it's one of the few lenses that actually stops all the way down to f45, which is quite interesting. It is a 1:10 macro, so it's not a particularly high magnification macro. With this adapter, and in fact, if I just show it next to the 2.8, so that's the 135mm f2.8, you can see that it's quite a bit heavier. Mind you, this one's got a tripod mount on it. Quite a bit heavier, quite a bit longer, and unwieldy. And to be honest with you wouldn't necessarily use it instead of one of the other two standard 135mm. However, if I just take it off, you'll actually see, even though it's actually still quite heavy, it's actually not all that long. A lot of this depth here, or a lot of this length, is with the 65. Whoops, I haven't quite done this up tight enough. I'll just do it up a little bit tighter. Is in the 65 to 116mm auto telescopic extension tube. And why would you do that? Why would you use this? Well, because when you go back to the 65 mark, you can actually focus this lens to infinity. So you can use it as a standard 135mm lens if you wish. I don't think I would. However, I love it as a macro lens, so don't discount it, especially if you already own one of these auto extension tubes. These are actually quite expensive to buy in their own right. They'll set you back about $260 to $300 if you're not careful, and this here will cost you probably a bit over $250 in good condition. So you're still looking at about $500 compared to $200, and anything as little as $50 if you wait around for the f3.5. So very interesting, and I'm not too sure why Olympus brought it in. It is a great macro lens though, and it's well worth thinking about for that reason alone. And if you didn't want to get yourself a 135, this will certainly do as a portrait lens in a pinch, remembering that's an f4.5, and so your background may not be quite as blurred as much as you would like, depending on how you like depth of field. So that is pretty much the only offerings you get with the portrait focal lengths. 85, 100, that's two 100s, two 135s, and if you wanted to have a bit more of a versatile all-rounder, the 90mm, and of course the 135mm f4.5. So that's your lot for today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.